Good morning. Welcome, Ari. Thank you so much for doing this. Opening question over to you, Ari. Just at about 100 days, 100 days of war, 100 days of hostages, 100 days of fear of regional escalation, 100 days since Israel changed forever. So where are we now, Ari, after 100 days?
Good morning. So first of all, thank you so much, Joel and Nicole. Thank you all. I thank all of you for joining in this morning. I deeply appreciate it. And when we chose this date, I don't think we noticed the fact that it will be the 100th day. And as you say, I mean, October 7th was the most important and disastrous day in modern Jewish history. Definitely the worst day in Israeli history, but I think the worst day in post-Holocaust Jewish history. I can tell you personally, before we get into the analysis, that we all feel we live through a nightmare. I mean, there's so much pain. In Israel, it's so many people have died. We all know someone who died. So many people have been seriously wounded. This is something not talked about. There are a lot of young men, especially, who lost their limbs, and so many women who were hurt in the first days. The hostages, so many traumatized people, and then there's all this suffering in Gaza, which anyone with a heart feels so badly about. So we moved in one day from a relative calm, sane, with all the problems we had, but the kind of Western democracy's life, into something that is still incomprehensible. And I really think, I said it in some of our previous talks, it took us back in time, in some senses, back to 1948, and in some ways back to the pogroms. It's an astonishing shock that we are still dealing with. And really, I think the essence of it, and I think this is very important to understand, that beyond the atrocities and all the pain of war, this was and is a direct attack on Israel's raison d'etre, on the fact that the Jewish people can have a national home in which we can live with safety and freedom. And again, I said it before, but I really think this is the battle of Israel. This is about the very existence of the Jewish democratic state. So when you look 100 days later, where are we? Beyond all the suffering and the human tragedy, is that we've seen a military recovery, Israeli military recovery, amazing social resistance, and American support that have prevented an overall catastrophe, a cataclysmic war. And again, I said it before, we have to remember what did not happen. We so far didn't have a full-blown war in the north. We didn't have a third intifada, a full intifada in the West Bank. We didn't have the collapse of the Arab-Israeli peace. This is the good news. The bad news is that we didn't achieve a decisive victory. There were two goals to this war: to dismantle Hamas and to free the hostages. 100 days later, both were not achieved. And if you want to look at the essence of combining emotions with strategy, Israel is here. Israel exists because we were able in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s to defeat all our enemies. Time after time after time, they tried to destroy us and kill us. And it's amazing, short, decisive victories that have convinced our enemies to stop attacking us and actually make peace. And this is why we have peace today. What happened on October 7th was the first Israeli defeat. And we have to balance it with a decisive victory. Otherwise, there will not be stability in this region, and there will not be stability in this country. This has not been achieved so far. We didn't have the 1956, 1967 experiences. We didn't have even the Entebbe experience. We have achievements, but we don't have this decisive victory. So sadly, I think that what we are looking at the 100th day of the war is a transition from a short war to a long war. I hope and pray we will have a pause, that there will be some end in Gaza, that there won't be escalation in the north. We'll discuss. But we have to be realistic and realize that because of the new circumstances, we are looking into a long process, not something we've not experienced before, where this may be a kind of 3, 5, 7-year war with pauses, in a sense. I hope it's not the case, but it is likely it is the case, and we have to get ready for it. So it calls for new thinking. It calls for mental, psychological, sociological, political conversion in Israel. And I'll end by saying that, in a sense, we must turn October 7th into our Pearl Harbor. God forbid, I don't want Nagasaki and Hiroshima at the end of the process. Right. But we have to turn what began as a terrible surprise and a terrible shock and a terrible failure of Israel into a decisive victory resembling the victory achieved over Japan. So for our own sake, and definitely for the Israelis' sake, we'll see a kind of MacArthur kind of process in Gaza that changes, that liberates the Palestinians and liberates the Israelis from the terrible threat of Hamas and creates a new reality, and turning what began as a horrible, horrible human tragedy into something that brings us eventually hope. But again, we need the resilience, the patience, and the wisdom for a long, long process. We have 3 parts of Gaza. There's one Israeli division in the north, where basically took over Gaza, not all the tunnels, and there isn't much fighting. They don't have full control. And as you very well know, that part of Gaza is very much destroyed. Some say 70% of the buildings, but it's the destruction is astonishing. Israel is in control. In mid-Gaza, there is another Israeli division that keeps north and southern Gaza apart. And in southern Gaza, another Israeli division with elite commando units is really trying to get the great prize, which is Yahya Sinwar. If Sinwar is captured in the coming weeks, that will be a game changer. It won't be exactly like when Bin Laden was killed by American forces, but it's the only dramatic achievement that one can see right now that can bring back Israeli deterrence and change reality. If that doesn't happen, Israel is, I would say, in a problematic situation. So if you go back, I think that what you see that there was a great tactical success. Again, after the terrible, terrible failure of the Israeli intelligence army on October 7th, they recovered, and actually tactically they worked, without getting now into the moral issues, which we'll discuss, they worked in a tactically great achievements. Also, the technology actually proved itself, and the ability of the Air Force to work with infantry, it's militarily wise, it worked. But there is no strategic concept, and there is no strategic achievement. So all these tactical achievements did not bring us close, as I said, to reaching the 2 goals of the war. True, we managed to free over 100 hostages, which is a great achievement, but 136 are still there. And we were not able to dismantle the structure, the functioning structure of the organization and Hamas, not the military and not the political. So this is where we are. Now, if I may, I'll tell you what troubles me. What troubles me is that what we see in Hamas and its Iranian mentors is evil genius. Evil genius. And again, I say that you don't have to be Jewish or Israeli or even pro-Israeli. This is concern for the entire free world. Because you see brilliant thinking that for 2 decades planned a system that detected all the Achilles heels of the Western way of conducting warfare. In a sense, it reminds us of the Viet Cong. They didn't have a jungle, so they created the tunnels as their own jungle. But they understood that they have to neutralize air superiority, intelligence superiority, and precise weapons. This is what kept the entire West safe in the last 20, 25 years. And we've not found a magic solution for that. And that's trouble. The other thing that concerns me, again, that the Vietnam kind of genius, evil genius, I'm not sure the Vietnamese were evil, but Hamas is definitely evil. Basically, what they are trying to do, they understand they don't need, in asymmetric warfare, they don't need military victory. Yahya Sinwar is not only willing, he wants to sacrifice the people of Gaza in order to reach American public opinion. His entire warfare is focused not on killing Israeli soldiers, that as well, but that's not the main thing, but on changing the minds of your friends and neighbors watching television and getting social media in the States. The whole strategy is to disconnect Israel from America. That's goal number 1 of Hamas. Goal number 2 is to use hostages to break the willpower of Israeli society. So our enemies are very sophisticated. They don't think in limited military terms. They think in wide strategic terms, and they focus on civilian population, using Palestinians to impact Americans and to break the will of Israelis. This is what the war is about. And what concerns me, that although we've seen amazing resilience of Israeli society, and our warriors are terrific, the courage, the mental strength in Israel in the last few months is amazing. But all that is not good enough if you don't have a strategic concept and an overall national strategy that deals with this kind of catch. I will say again, just to end that, Israel's problem to begin with is that we must be the top dog in the Middle East, and we must seem to be the underdog in the East Coast. Okay, this is where we are. Even our Prime Minister Levi Eshkol many years ago, when someone explained this to him, and they say to him, we must be Shimshon, Samson in the Middle East, and we must be a Nebuch in Brooklyn. So I said, okay, let's be Shimshon the Nebuch. But this is the catch. Right now, we are perceived as underdog in the Middle East and top dog in the East Coast. And this is bad news. This is something we have to change, and it did not happen yet.
And what about hostages? Any?
Oh, I'm sorry. So obviously, look. First of all, I must tell you that this is so sensitive and so painful that I find it difficult to say all I know. I'm not sure that all the hostages are alive. The ones who are alive are in the most horrible situation. In the most horrible. I mean, of the ones who were released, there was a kind of vision. There was some that somehow were, I mean, it was all horrific. We just in my television show, we had the other day a 7-year-old charming boy describing his experiences. And on the one hand, it's so charming and it's so amazing how they dealt with it. But you say a 7-year-old taking prisoners, 7 years old. But obviously with the ones there, because so many of them are soldiers and so many are young women, they are treated in the most horrific way you can imagine. So obviously we must do everything possible to release them. The way I phrase it is everything but surrender. We cannot lose the war. But anything else, we're willing to pay prices that no one would have imagined that we will be able, like releasing all the Palestinian prisoners, doing many, many other things. I think, and again, I've said it before, that the key that was not used so far is pressure on Qatar. I don't understand. I mean, if there is an international community to speak of, how does it accept as a legitimate player a country that finances these atrocities? And they knew what they were financing, and this real way to release them is not only Israel willing to pay a high price, which we should do, but I think that any person boarding a Qatar airline flight should see pictures of the young ladies kept now and whatever is done to them. This is not the fact that Qatar can have such influence in Wall Street, in academia, in sports, in arts, in everything. While they are the sponsor of this evil, this is morally unacceptable, and I think it's a strategic mistake. The problem is that America has a very complicated relationship with Qatar, and Israel must negotiate with Qatar, so the government cannot attack them. But I still hope that there will be some movement of really putting a real kind of political siege on Qatar, because in my mind, they are the key to the release of the hostages. Israel is absolutely, I don't want to use the obsessed because that would sound negative, but we all think about the hostages all the time. It's everywhere. You know, if you come visit Israel, the first thing you'll notice in Ben Gurion Airport is 136 pictures of the hostages, welcoming you to Israel. This is our welcome to Israel. And there was a huge rally. Actually, there is a huge rally as we speak, a 24-hour rally. There are demonstrations. Everybody is look, again, talking about the beautiful side of Israel, the solidarity here, the sense of family, of an enlarged family is astonishing. And it makes me very proud of just a moment. I'm sorry, but it makes me very proud of the Israeli spirit and the Israeli values. I mean, we really don't forget. I'll say probably some good things about your president soon, but I'll say that his devotion to this and the way he dealt with that, and the American administration was amazing. And again, there is the problem of the complicated relationship with Qatar that limits everybody's ability to be forceful. But I think the commitment is there, and it's like I believe about the Americans who are Israeli citizens. I think that the other non-Israeli citizens, if they are alive, they will be released. I mean, I think that, again, it's horrible that they have to go through what they are going, but the issue is with the Israeli citizens, even if they have double citizenship, and so far Sinwar and his people are sticking to their sadistic approach, and they are using these people in the most atrocious way possible. I went up to the northern Galilee with a dear friend of mine who just published a long piece in a prestigious American paper about Israel. And although I knew the facts, I found it, incredible. Entire Upper Galilee is like it's ghost villages and ghost towns. I mean, 80,000 people have been evacuated, and there is something really eerie in the fact that parts of sovereign Israel, we're not talking about some occupied or disputed land, the best and most beautiful parts of Israel are now vacant, and obviously this is an intolerable situation, and I'll get to that in a minute. So if you look at the recent events, we had a very dangerous week. And the dangerous week was when Israel decided to do some target killing of an Iranian general, the head of Hamas in Lebanon, Aroui, the head of the commander forces of Hezbollah, and some others. So Israel took what you saw there is two things. One, you realize that Israel has much better intelligence in Lebanon than in Gaza. Okay, so they were actually able to do the kind of warfare that you expect Israel to do, which was perfect information, perfect technology, that you target the bad guy, no collateral damage or hardly any collateral damage, and this was in a sense Israel back. In a sense, it gave you back a sense of Israel's. It's the two: Israel's power and Israel's moral way of fighting, which is unlike the mess, the terrible mess we have in Gaza. But there was another element, that there was audacity in this, because the Israeli government has decided, and usually I disagree with the government, but here perhaps they were right, that if you don't show guts, you cannot strike a deal. You won't have your deterrence, and they took a great risk. The result on the other side, the outcome was, and again, I don't know how many of you have, how much it was covered in the United States, but 3 Hezbollah attacks on strategic sites that were successful, but were like symbolic. Okay, each one of them could have been a casus belli. It was like a main command, 3 strategic, very important strategic sites. But thank God we survived that week, okay, without escalation, and we have to see what happens now. Now, if you look at the fundamentals, the assumption is that both Israel for sure, but we still assume that Nasrallah does not want a full term before, but I'll repeat it. Israel and Hezbollah is a bit like conventional MAD, mutual assured destruction. The consequences of a third Lebanon war are so dramatic, definitely for Lebanon, but even for Israel, that both parties really don't want it. The outcome will be disastrous. So both sides are playing a kind of game, trying to avoid the big war, but doing whatever they can under that threshold. There are 3 major dangers here. One is miscalculation. We feared that even before the war. But when you have just the incident like today, if the next missile kills 10 Israeli children somewhere, we'll be at war. And if Israel does something that is over the top in Lebanon, we'll be at war. So miscalculation is danger number 1. Danger number 2 is we don't know what Iran wants. Most people assume that Iran doesn't want an overall war, but some say perhaps it will like a war, so it can, under the clouds of war, it can have a breakthrough to have its nuclear power. So that's a question mark. I don't know what the answer is. But the third element is what I said before. The situation in the north of Israel is unbearable. We cannot expect our citizens to go back to their homes with Hezbollah people who are as cruel and even more effective than the Hamas people 100 yards from their windows. So I will be pushed away 5, 7, 10 miles from the border. The best solution will be the diplomatic one, which the American envoy is trying to achieve. Doesn't seem very likely. If that fails, Israel may want to go for a limited military operation. But when things are so explosive, no one knows if a limited operation will not lead to the Great War. So 100 years, it's bad in the north. It's not catastrophic, but it's uncontainable. It's unbearable. And this is still waiting for us. It's a huge strategic dilemma, and we don't yet know where this is going. I mean, the significance of the Houthis, again, from the Israeli perspective, but it's not Israeli, is to prove to all of us that we're not talking about an Israel-Hamas war. This is a low-intensity regional conflict. This is a low-intensity Iran-Israeli war. Hamas is just, and again, Israeli, with all the what people say about Israel's Hezbollah, there is a total failure of Israel to explain the larger picture. Hezbollah is just one of 7 Iranian bases surrounding Israel and intending to suffocate Israel, to strangle Israel. That's a great, grand Iranian strategy. So the Houthis are the most blunt, except for Hezbollah, example of this Iranian octopus, which has 7, 8 arms trying to kill Israel gradually or not gradually. So that's significance number 1. Significance number 2, we talked about in the past, but I'll repeat the phrase because I think it's very important. In many ways, the significance of this war, that it's people with 11th century values who have 21st century technology. And the Houthis are a proof of atrocities. I mean, they would have done it. But you don't see the atrocities that you've seen with the Hamas terrorists. But the ability of such radical people with an extreme ideology to take over, to have such global influence, actually, with the new technology, this is the challenge facing all of us. This is relevant not only for Israel. Now, specifically, what we see here is, one, an attack on free commerce, on free trade. The number of the number of ships going through the Bab el-Mandeb, through that area, has fallen by 37%. The share of containers dropped by 80%. 80%. And why? Because the major carriers of containers have some sort of all kind indirect Israeli connections, and they are afraid to go through these areas because they might be affected. Regarding Israel, you have a quiet naval blockade on Israel. The port of Eilat is neutralized. We have no goods, almost nearly no goods coming from Eilat. And the danger is that there will be attacks in the Mediterranean, which will then endanger Ashdod and Haifa. Israel is like an island. We totally depend on our naval commerce. So this is, again, like on other issues. It's like that story of the frog with the hot water. What you see here with the Houthis, it's not mega dramatic the way October 7th, but it's a process that has serious strategic implications, and it's going the wrong way. In that sense, once again, I salute your commander-in-chief, and I think the action taken the other day and probably ongoing by America, the UK with the support of Canada, Holland, Bahrain, and Australia, if I remember correctly, is extremely important, because this is really not about Israel. This is about in the dimension of guarding liberty. This is essential. We can, if we will let the Houthis, paralyze trade in the Suez Canal. By the way, it has huge implication in Egypt, and it can destabilize Egypt because the Suez Canal is a source of it's a major source of income. So if you don't want the moderates in the Middle East to collapse, if you don't want to let radical tribes and groups and terrorist organizations endanger our world order, we have to see that this stops, this doesn't go on. Here's a chance to criticize my government a bit. Again, not that we are totally responsible, but I think serious mistakes were made by the Israeli government. So again, let's look at the good news. The Sinwar plan was to have a major uprising, a terrorist attack coming from the West Bank into Israel. That's what he had in mind. That didn't happen so far. But just the other day, 2 days ago, the Shabak, the Israeli Secret Service, issued a strategic warning that this may happen, that the danger of this happening is growing. Now, the problem here is that Israel's policy was, we carried a big stick, but we didn't speak softly. And if you want to take another stick metaphor, we were very assertive in trying to dismantle the Hamas terrorist infrastructure in the West Bank. But we didn't do enough to support the PA, to support moderate Palestinians, to support the Palestinian population. And extremist Jewish groups did horrible things and they still do, to provoke. And the government, because of Netanyahu's failure to confront his extreme right-wing partners, so to speak, people that I'm ashamed are part of my government, this has not been dealt with. So you have a kind of a cocktail of an unstable situation into which the failure, in this situation, you have, and I don't have illusions about the PA. The PA has many problems, but I don't see them bringing peace, but they were very helpful in preventing violence in the last 17 years or so. So what we should do is hug the PA, again, not thinking that they'll save us and bring peace, but support them and support the Palestinian population, see that they have economic relief, they have economic hope, and try, I would say, to water the grass so the fire doesn't catch. And right now we are, again, I don't want to, in a tricky situation. And if you remember that there are so many settlements throughout the West Bank, what we have learned on October 7th is that Jewish small villages are very vulnerable. So I don't want to get into the scenarios of how dangerous this can get. Not too late to take real action to prevent this. And again, because we were lucky that it didn't happen yet, and we must do everything possible to prevent escalation there. If I may say as a last sentence on this, what all these tragic events has proved, that the Palestinian issue was the elephant in the room. For 15 years, we all ignored it in a sense. I mean, there was some talk, but it went from Broadway to off-Broadway. And I would say there were two kinds of blindness. The right-wing blindness is to realize that there are Palestinians there, that there are millions of people whose needs you have to address, whose rights have to be respected. The left-wing blindness was not to see that there are radical, fanatical forces in Palestinian society that you have to confront. You cannot be naive about them. So in my mind, the goal of the war is, regarding Gaza, I say, demilitarization, de-radicalization, and rehabilitation. And regarding the overall Palestinian issue, I say, let's really free the Palestinians from Hamas, and let's work with the moderate Palestinians, even if there are, if with all the problems, and I'm not naive, in order to strengthen the life-loving and stability-wishing forces in Palestinian society, because otherwise, things will be a mess. We'll really have to find something really positive to talk about later.
Well, we're trying. We'll try to get.
Well, we have to. It's I insist on not getting depressed with everything that's going on. So now, look, I must say that, like most other Israelis, this theater in The Hague, makes me very angry, and I can be, I really try to look at the conflict with fairness, and I see both sides. And what happened in The Hague, you look at the city, in the city or in the country that lost 75% of its Jews, 105,000 Jews. The only people, one of the only people that experienced genocide in the last 100 years, there were a few other incidents, but ours was the most dramatic, is charged with genocide while ignoring and overlooking the fact that we had the genocide moment on October 7th, not only because of the atrocities committed to the raped women and to the kidnapped children and to the beheaded people and to the burned families, but because we were all targeted. I was targeted, my daughter, my sons, my wife, my friends, everyone I know, and probably many people on this Zoom conversation. They're really genocidal. They really want to kill us all. If they have a chance, no Jewish Israeli and no Jew will be alive. So you have the most striking, dramatic, genocidal phenomena, and then you take the Israel and say it commits genocide? Now, again, Israel can be criticized. You can say that the bombings were wrong. You can say some actions were wrong. You can even take it, you can take some things that were done wrong and to the ICC, you can do that. But genocide? Really? I mean, isn't our world crazy enough? This is not a legal procedure. This is like a crazy asylum. Now, sorry for my emotion, but having said that, I think the Israeli legal team, and Nicole, you're a better judge of that, but I think they did good work in defending it. For once, Israel did something smart and sent Aaron Barak, our liberal chief justice, to be there in the court, which is good. But it's all politics, and I don't know. We had no other way. We had to go there. I'm happy we went there. I'm happy that, unlike in the past, we put our case, because again, there are things that Israel can be criticized and perhaps should be criticized, but not this. This is unacceptable. If it goes through, it has serious diplomatic. At the end of the day, it will bring us to the American point, because it will go to the Security Council of the UN, and then America dilemma whether it uses its veto power vis-a-vis the Hague decision. That'll be a major American dilemma. But I hope that will not be the case. But again, if I may say in one sentence, and I hope it's okay and that I'm not stepping on any minds, but there is an element here. There is a Hague-Harvard relationship. What we see here, and we have to be aware of, is one, that anti-Semitism is back big time. For 75, or I would say since 45, anti-Semitism, the Holocaust was like chemotherapy to anti-Semitism. And now the chemotherapy is gone, and anti-Semitism is back in a horrible way. And the most clear manifestation of it is not recognizing, of all the people of the world, basically the new claim is that the one people that doesn't have the right of self-determination and the right of self-defense is the Jewish people. That's pure anti-Semitism. That's not occupation and not settlements and not Netanyahu and all. That's the new anti-Semitism. If the one people in the world that are not allowed to have a state and are not allowed to use force to defend themselves, is that the same people that just came out from Auschwitz 8 years ago? So we have to acknowledge that this is what we are facing, and that there is so much attempt to hide that fact. Having said that, I think that Israel made serious mistakes. I think that our extreme right-wing government, our wrong policy in the West Bank with occupation and settlements, our radicals have played into the hands of the anti-Semites. So we have to fight two wars. We have to fight and to call a spade, not to be polite and not to be apologetic. We have the right to defend our people and fight for our people. And if we have forgotten it, we are a minority, and we are a persecuted minority, those of us who forgot. But at the same time, we must be moral. We must be moral. So we have to fix in Israel so there is moral clarity. And it will be very clear what we are fighting for and what we are about. First of all, Germany has been our second best ally for decades, for a long time. And I really must, express my deep respect to the German political body that seriously takes their moral responsibility in a very clear way over the years. The good news here, and somewhat surprised, is when Angela Merkel left, Angela Merkel was I admired her. I loved her politics. I thought she was amazing in every respect. When she left the stage, I was really worried. And here comes Chancellor Scholz, who's a social democrat, who's from the German left, and he proves to have this moral backbone. Now, he came here in the first days of the war. His plane was there was attack on Ben Gurion Airport, so he had to leave his plane and to crawl on the runways of Ben Gurion Airport, hiding from the missiles that were from the rockets. So Germany has stood by us in the most, and their anti-Hamas laws are very clear. Again, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but some of the moral clarity that was lost in some of your universities has not, the two people that surprised us for the better here are Gulf people, leaders in the Bahrain, and the German chancellor, who have the moral courage that some leaders of some American universities don't have. So I think that's striking. If I may try to add a bit of an explanation, it's not, and it's relevant when we'll talk about President Biden in a minute. It's not only the historical commitment to Israel. The Ukraine war has opened up the eyes of Europeans and mainly Germans. And they understand that after they've been sheltered from the violent forces of history for 70 years, danger now. So they are building up their armies, they are building up their defenses, they are doubling their budgets. Europe is changing. Now, it's much more pleasant when it's a social democrat Schulz doing it than some of the Italian prime minister or the new guys in Holland, okay? So, but there is a profound change. And if you want, again, we want some good news. The fact that right now, or we just signed a deal that will allow Arrow missiles, anti-missile Israeli missiles, to protect Berlin, is in my mind the greatest victory of Israel possible. The fact that our technology, this is technology that protects Western society, or not Western, free society, all free societies, Western or Eastern. So the fact that the Arrow protects Berlin is it's a symbol of the German-Israeli relationship and of the achievement of Israel, that faced with the tragedy of the conflict, we try to do everything possible to create capabilities to protect our free society. And this is the bond that connects this new Germany and Israel. And if you wish, it goes right into Biden. Repeat something I've said, because I'm willing to sing it all day long and all night long. President Joe Biden is my hero. I admire the guy. I just admire the guy. And I hope the Republicans among us to understand why this is beyond American politics. Listen, America for 3 decades was all benign mistakes, wanting peace, wanting democracy, wanting all kinds of things. But it was like 3 decades of one mistake after the other. You all remember the Iraq War, but there were several others. Here in 3 months, America acted in the most wise, decisive, moral, heroic way. If President Biden and his team would not have sent the aircraft carriers, and if he had not carried the don't speech on Tuesday, October 10th, if I remember correctly, we would have been in a cataclysmic war right now. We would not have been able, and it's time for us, citizens of the West, we criticize our government so much, we have to remember what was prevented. What was prevented? And now, so I'll add something that we didn't know. I knew, but I couldn't talk about it in our previous talks. Israel was about to attack Lebanon on October 11th. We would have been in a catastrophe. So Biden was so adamant vis-a-vis the bad guys, but with his support, he enabled the sane people, the few sane people in our cabinet, to prevent that horrific attack. So again and again, and I'll repeat something I said, and I think that Biden's amazing record here is not in spite of his age, it's because of his age. He has World War II in his background. He has the Cold War in him. He's a tough, old-fashioned Democrat. And that's what the world needs. That's definitely what the Middle East. So I have, and by the way, I'll add two names. I think that Jake Sullivan is running this in the most amazing way, and Bill Burns is doing it amazing. So we have a kind of BBS in Washington fighting BDS and really doing amazing job. And again, it's important for me to repeat. It's not only, I don't speak only in Israeli, and I don't think they're only motivated by their love to Israel, and they love Israel. They understand that America is facing here an axis of evil. Russia and Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas are at the front, and China is at the back. So they are not only doing it in order to protect Israel, they do it to protect liberty at large and American national interests. And I'm so worried, and my anger at my government is that we have to do everything possible to help Biden help us. And what my dear Prime Minister is doing is to make it. And there are two issues here. One, and I think some of you know me, I'm not an obsessive anti-Bibi person, okay? I gave the guy much more credit than he deserved. But the guy has a narcissistic element of being ungrateful. Being ungrateful. You cannot be, America saved us. America is saving us day by day. Biden has risked his political future in order to do the right thing. Express gratitude. Say toda. Say thank you. He's not able to do that. But beyond that, there is politics. He depends politically on Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, these extremists. And when it comes to a junction, he has to choose between Biden and Smotrich, he chooses Smotrich. So he's doing everything possible to undermine this essential alliance. And again, the danger is that comes 2024. I've heard you have elections this year, if I'm not mistaken, and now it's time for Biden politics, which I can understand. So I really hope that there will be a change, and perhaps we'll talk about what's needed in Israel, and I won't get into the friction points. There are 3 or 4 friction points. Some have to do with what we discussed, the horizon for Gaza, the PA, and so on. But it's time for Mr. Netanyahu to wake up and stop endangering Israel's national interests by endangering the amazing gift we got from God by having Biden in the Oval Office. This war was caused, I just referred to it, because of Israeli internal division. We committed political suicide. And this is what our internal division, the Jews have destroyed themselves in First Temple and Second Temple. And now we did this crazy, that you look at this wise people with so much talent, and there is no political talent to keep unity. Now, I know you have some problems in America and there are some problems in Europe, but what we did in 2023 is crazy. The extremist government led us to a kind of turmoil and that brought this attack. So now the issue, now what you've seen during, and those of you who were when I visited New York and we had a talk at the Harvard Club in April, and I said then there was no war in sight, and I said, remember 2023, horrible things will happen because of the internal division there, and I'm no prophet. It was so clear that we've done that to ourselves. During the war, you've seen the best of Israel. You've seen social cohesion. The soldiers fight together. The civilians are in it together. It's amazing. I'm telling you, just those of you who have not been here, coming to feel the intimacy, the solidarity, the resilience, it's amazing. It's amazing. On the political level, we've created this national unity government. I had a humble part in helping it being created, and I think it saved us, again, in many ways. 100 days later, it's not good enough. Because when you move from a short war to a long, and when the Bibi people and his partners are behaving in a totally irresponsible way, not only regarding the Americans, but on many other issues, you are facing you are coming to a T-junction. And basically, there are three options. I mean, there are two options that are discussed. I mean, one is elections. Right now, according to the polls, Benny Gantz seems to be the likely winner. The second option is constructive non-confidence vote, which means a new government in the same Knesset. And then Gadi Eisenkot may be the potential candidate for that. Bibi will try to buy time as much as possible, so it won't be elections. There is another option, which I've been talking about, which is actually the other way around, which is full unity, actually adding Lapid and Lieberman and all the others to the government. So it's not a right-wing government with some fig leaf, but it's a real unity government that can deal with the war. Obviously, elections would be the best solution. The only problem, it's very dangerous. When war has not ended, and rockets may come in from the south, and rockets may come from the north, it's a dangerous process. So I think that we are coming to a point where it will be very difficult to hold the present superficial unity together. I think long-term, I doubt it if Netanyahu can survive. I mean, the rage is so are now to a new Israeli government that brings unity and brings us to a new phase is not clear. It's a very dangerous corridor, or very dangerous bridge to cross. I'll say one word about Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz is a natural healer. Okay, so he's so it's no wonder that he's so popular right now. The problem is that he will need, if he's to be the person, he will need a team, ideas, content to deal with the post-war issues and challenges. The Americans are putting a lot of pressure on him and Eisenkot not to leave, because they are terrified by the possibility of having to deal with this war with Netanyahu and his extremists. I think that, and Netanyahu is terrified of that, because Netanyahu needs so much Gantz and Eisenkot to balance the extremists. But Benny Gantz is fed up. His constituency is fed up. So it's very tricky right now. And I'll say one thing, that there's also political danger for Gantz, because if he leaves before the war ends, Netanyahu will immediately say he defected, he ran away. And I still think Netanyahu doesn't have a chance, but things like that can, give Bibi base. And if Gantz leaves tomorrow, he's also taking a political risk. So on the one hand, it's so clear that unity government that limited unity government that I believed in and tried to help create it's running out of legitimacy and steam, and we'll need something different. We're approaching an important juncture there. So first of all, I think that anyone who wants to, no obligation, no pressure. But anyone who wants to come, I think it's a fascinating experience. I see people who come, and in many cases, it's like inspiring. I mean, you come into war zone, but you are like actually inspired by what I've described, and it's fine. I mean, Israelis are happy. But by the way, Timna, my wife, and I went. There was a family of people from the south that we adopted that who experienced the whole trauma and lost their home, and we went down with them. And a group of American leaders from New York came, and they were so thrilled, to tell their stories. Even psychologically, it was so it's no burden. So anyone who wants to come, feel free. It's fine. But I think you asked the right question. I think there's something much larger and more important that needs to be done. With the fact that we were attacked in such a way here, and the Jewish community was attacked in such a way in North America and in Europe, but in America, it's big news. We didn't have that. I think it really proves how dependent we are on each other and how much we depend, the interdependency. We really will not have a future here without you, and you will not have a Jewish future without us. And I think it's high time. I believed in it 10 years ago, but now it's clear. Get involved. Don't only support hospitals and charities, which is very nice. Get involved. What is at risk is non-Orthodox Jewish civilization. Because, as I've said in one of my conversations, the ultra-Orthodox, I have nothing against them, but they'll survive. They'll be okay wherever they are. If there isn't a democratic Israel that is moral and impressive and inspiring, non-Orthodox Jewish civilization in the diaspora and even in America will be in danger. So it's time not to be polite, not to be apprehensive, get involved. Find the Israelis that you believe in. Find the causes in Israel you believe in. And we must fight together to save non-Orthodox Jewish life in Israel and in North America and throughout the world. So while the extremists were so sophisticated and they put resources and they had a strategy and they changed Israel, this war was to a large extent brought, I don't want to get into names, by a bunch of Americans who financed radical agenda of one think tank that nearly destroyed the country. So let's do the opposite. Let's do it in a serious way. Let's get all the resources and partners and people we have to work seriously and systematically in order to save Israel. It's essential for all of us. I really think that 2023 was the most traumatic year in our modern history and in the Jewish, in modern Jewish and Israeli life. I think 2024 will be the most important year in Israel's history and the history of modern Jewish life. And the reason is, one, we've seen the malaise. It's not only the military failure and the intelligence failure. We've seen, and I won't explain now, if people will ask, I'm willing to give the long answer, what we've learned. But we've learned how much rot there was here, how many fundamental mistakes. And it's not only Netanyahu. Netanyahu is definitely responsible, in my mind, should go. But it's not just him. It's much deeper and larger and wider. So we've seen the problem, we see the problem. Then we experience a national trauma that endangers us. Again, we wrestled with it, but we're all post-traumatic, or we're in the trauma. But on the other side, we see this incredible, inspiring forces of Israeli society that are amazing. So this is the make or break year. we have to take, and I myself believed in it before I wrote a book that was not translated to English about it. Real Israel is amazing. Israeli society, Israeli individuals, Israeli family. It's astonishing. It's astonishing. Again, it's a long conversation. I won't get into it why. Political Israel is dysfunctional and to a large degree corrupt. So this is the year that we have to take all the positive energy from real Israel and bring it up and, if you wish, transform Jerusalem. Transform Jerusalem. And again, I have my ideas. I don't want to bore you now. I think that whoever the new leaders are, they need to be provided with vision. We definitely need a new deal. It's FDR stuff, at the very least. At the very least. And so we need the vision, we need the ideas, we need the content. So it won't be just a personal change, but we will be able to turn this terrible crisis into something positive. And again, I'll say the following: we are faced with a Churchillian moment. We have a Churchillian people, and we don't have a Churchill. So now let's get working, and let's get all the resources, intellectual, whatever that we have, in order to work with the leadership we have and bring some new leaders. So we really transform Israel. And paraphrase on the musical I like very much. We only got one shot. We cannot miss it. So the question is about what Bibi should do. Look, I spent so many years waiting for the benign Netanyahu to make his appearance. So, but look, to a degree, it's true that a lot of the lunacy that is happening, like in the West Bank, so it's not something he wants. Okay, he's caught in that. Again, he's politically responsible, but I think that if he, again, I've lost my hope that this will happen, but if I have to answer the question, I think it's time for him to give a really courageous speech. He used to be good in speeches. He lost that as well. But explaining to Israelis, because let's understand what's happening. We have to understand how terrified Israelis are. One of the successes of Hamas is they planted the fear and terror and horror in all of us. So there is this tendency when there is fear, to be just tough, and just believe in power and rifles and pistols and everything. And it's time for him to tell the people that for Israel to be powerful, for Israel to survive and to be strong, it must be moral and benign and part of the free world. And that if these extremists, and again, don't get me wrong, Israel is no South Africa and no Rhodesia, and all these comparisons I totally reject. But if these people will play into the hands of our enemy and will portray Israel as a kind of South Africa, they will endanger us more than all our enemies. So it's time for the moderate, responsible right to stand against the extreme right and say, not only for democratic and liberal values and national security, we must stop this extreme right-wing lunacy. Losing the PR, which obviously is the case. There are two dimensions. One, I find it outrageous that we don't have a strong, impressive Israeli voice in America in such a time. I don't know who he is, preferably who she is, but we should have had someone who represents the best of Israel that Americans relate to. We know our world. Everything is quick, simplistic, judgmental. You cannot go into long stories. all Americans should have been exposed now to someone who would have done what Abba Eban did many years ago and Golda Meir did many years ago, and to a certain degree some others did in recent years. The fact that there is no strong Israeli voice that tells the Israeli story in a way and makes this connection between the great American democracy and the frontier Israeli democracy, that's criminal. That's like insane. This is more important than another 3 brigades of tanks or another 2 squadrons of planes. More important. And the fact that we it's not only that we lost that battle, we like abandoned it. We didn't do any serious work. But PR is not enough. It's policy as well. So the policy has to, I'll say 3 things. One, we have to make it clear that we are not fighting Hamas. And make it clear 12 times a day. And work with moderate Palestinians if you have some problems with them, in order to say, let's fight. We want Palestinians should not be victims of this evil regime. So don't make it a war against Palestine, make it, which is the case. Part of it is this positive horizon for Gaza, which I discussed, and part of it is a commitment to peace in the long term. Again, I'm not naive. I don't think that we can have a 2-state solution implemented tomorrow, but give this war some hope. Now, let us feel, one, that we are fighting for common values of the entire free world, that we fight as a democracy, but also that the horizon is a horizon of peace and at least coexistence at the first stage. Don't make it. You cannot win a war for minds and hearts of people when all they see is just people getting killed. It doesn't work. So and Yitzhak Rabin was a tough guy. He was a warrior, but by bringing the idea of peace and the horizon of peace, he was also able to fight wars better. Okay. So I wrote an article the other week saying, whatever happened to Jewish wisdom? We used to be smart, and there is something very not only unpleasant but not smart about the way the extreme right is handling this war. I think that anti-Semitism will wake up many people, and again, for I think nearly half a century, there was this illusion that it's gone, that it's not a major, perhaps not totally gone, but it's not a major factor. And sadly, I think that what young Jewish students feel on campuses is, and not only in campuses, in high schools and in their surrounding, is something that their parents and perhaps even their grandparents didn't experience. We are back in time there. So again, this is why it's so essential for Israel to be a beacon here and not to be the embarrassing relative. As long as Israel looks like the embarrassing relative, they cannot identify with it. And I think Israel's mission is to be a home and a safe haven for all Jews. It's not that all Jews have to move there, but our mission is to take care of all Jews. And it's a crime. It's a crime that we are not taking good care of the younger generation of American Jews who are exposed to all this poison and don't get enough moral and spiritual and intellectual support from the Jewish democratic state. So we have to make clear that Israel on the right side of history. And at the same time, on the other side, I do think, again, sadly, that the dynamics going on now will bring many of our youngsters back home, so to speak.